Here again, the words, actually 3 of the verses from the Gospel of Isaiah, the 12th chapter, beginning with the first verse. And again, I'm reading from my NIV translation, so it's going to look a little different than if you're going to try to follow along with it. In that day you will say, I will praise you, O Lord. Although you were angry with me, your anger has turned away, and you have comforted me. Surely God is my salvation. I will trust and not be afraid. The Lord is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation. With joy you will draw water from the wells of salvation. So far, this is the portion of the word of our God. So, years ago, we were members, or at least attenders of a church. It's a Lutheran church, and my daughters actually went to preschool there at one point in time. And they found out, they had 2 services. Okay? They had an 8 o'clock service, which was more like what you're seeing right now. Okay, it was very similar to the hymns and with the liturgy and stuff like that. And then they had a, and I'm going to drive you crazy. Okay. This actually kind of ties in with what I'm trying to say here. But they had a later service, which was a contemporary service, and one of their contemporary worship people found out that I used to play drums. Right? You can tell I can't sit still. See? So they found out that I played drums, and so they said, "Oh, okay, let's get together." So I told them, "Listen, it's not my favorite service. I actually prefer the 8 o'clock one." I said, "But I would do it once in a while." Okay, and so I would do that. So I went to the very first meeting, and we sat down in this meeting, and there was this whole group of people, and I won't name them or anything else like that, but this whole group of people sitting there, and they started going around the table, and they kept asking each other, "Okay, man, what did your walk with the Lord look like this past week? What did you do? What were you up to?" I remember sitting there, and each one kind of said, I did this, or I talked to someone about this, or I was able to pray with someone about, and it was just, but it started to make me kind of think, what are we really focusing on, right? And they finally got around to me, and it was my turn to talk, and I said, well, my walk with the Lord, honestly, I felt like I was running about 250 miles per hour the opposite direction. That's what my walk with the Lord seemed like. And I realized after a while that sometimes as Christians, we got to really be careful where our focus lies. Is it with us? Do we put a lot of stock in what we're doing and how we're acting and what we're doing? Or is it with Him? Is it on He who is our salvation? Because if I tell people this story all the time, I say, Joe, if I were to give my life to Christ, He'd give it back and say, I don't want your life because it's terrible. He would say, you want mine instead. That's what you want, right? And so where is our focus in all this? Now, it's interesting because here, Isaiah is writing to the Israelites, and he's sort of speaking for them, if you will. But he says, you guys will say, although you were angry with me at one point in time, okay? And you know what? We all have to sit back and realize that when it comes to sin, God doesn't like it. He's not a fan of sin. It's something, and as a matter of fact, the same Isaiah writes at one point in time, I hate iniquity, which is one of those old English words that we use for sin, right? You cannot stand sin. You and I know that at the fall of Adam and Eve, God was angry. He was upset. He judged sin quite severely. He wasn't just angry with Adam and Eve. At that point in time, even in speeding ahead in history, he was kind of angry with us too. We're sinners, right? And when we were conceived natural-born enemies of God. That's something that God doesn't take us. You know what? Y'all in here, we can go driving down the road and we can go past a cemetery, and as Christians, we know why those are there. Remember, God was angry with sin. He said, okay, from now on, you're going to return to the dust and this kind of stuff like that. He was angry. And what Satan likes to do sometimes with us is after we come to faith, after we believe that God, He is our salvation, He took care of it for us in Jesus. When that happens, sometimes Satan likes to pull us aside and say, are you sure He's still angry? Are you positive about that? Are you absolutely sure? When in reality, he deserves to be, doesn't he? Because when we look at our lives and just think about this past week of some of the thoughts that we may have had and some of the actions we made, some of the unlovingness we may have displayed at some point in time. I tell people, if you want to get me to confession, just jump in the cab of my truck and drive with me around this town. And you'll convict me of all kinds of sins, trust me. But we just have to sit back and look at that and realize that God don't like that. And then when it comes to sin too, right, there are so many churches that are looking at what God calls sin, right, in this book, and are starting to sit back and sort of say, you know what, maybe maybe it's not such a big deal today or something like that. You heard it in James. I didn't realize this. I was just talking to Remy about this over. I didn't realize this is one of the other readings. But you heard that God doesn't change like shifting shadows. Right? He doesn't suddenly change his mind when it comes to calling sin, sin. So we could say with the Israelites, at one point in time, you were angry with me, but guess what? Now he ain't. Now he's not angry with us because he took care of everything that he had to do for us. It says that God is my salvation. He doesn't just provide it, he actually is it. And so what is he saying? I want you to fix your eyes not on you, but on me. Right? I'm the one who's going to supply all of your salvation. I'm going to take care of it. You guys can't even contribute towards it. Like I said, we have Lutheran on our sign out here because that was Martin Luther. He realized that in the teaching of the medieval church, and they were adding all of these penances and all these things that people were supposed to do to add to it. He said, not only is that wrong, when Martin Luther would argue with especially theologians, right? Martin Luther was actually kind of a nice guy. But when he was talking with the theologians, he was not such a nice guy. Okay? He really did, because he saw them and they had a lot of responsibility and they weren't fulfilling that God-given responsibility. And he told them, not only is it wrong when you tell people that they got to add and do their things like that, it's actually a slap in the face to God. It's sort of saying that you're my salvation, but not fully my salvation, God. Right? You're not all of it. You're not enough. That Jesus dying on the cross wasn't enough, but no, he is enough. He is salvation. He would eventually go on for these Israelites who were in captivity and bring them out of Babylon, right? And he'd bring them back, that remnant back to Israel, but he had bigger plans to be their salvation. They weren't just going to be saved from Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians. They had to be saved from their sins. And he goes on to say that with joy you will draw water from the wells of salvation. How is it that he is our salvation? Take a look in that manger on that very first Christmas. There's your salvation. Mary was able to actually cuddle salvation. Think about that, right? And then take a look at that cross hanging in agony. This is the same Jesus, by the way, who would tell that woman at the well one time, if you drink from this well, if you drink from me and this well, this is water, you will never be thirsty again. You know why? Because you don't have to rely on yourself anymore. I am your salvation. Me there on that cross, I am paying for your sin. I am becoming everything the Father hates. I'll deal with him turning his back on me so that he will never have to turn his back on any of you. Me too. This, by the way, every time I'm preaching, I'm always thinking to myself, Joe, are you listening? You sure? Sure, right? And I remember we had this seminary professor who would always tell us, hey guys, I just want you to know, God loves pastors too. Okay? just keep that in mind. But he has become our salvation. Jesus took care of it. He took care of it fully. He doesn't ask anything from us. He's it. Where can our focus lie? And as our focus lies on the cross, as it lies on that empty tomb, and remember for some of our Baptist dads, that's what that white ball here for. It's still the season of Easter. We're getting close though, Pentecost. And then it changed to green for like ever. It's that cross, that empty tomb. Take a look. Put your focus on that. Is it going to change the way you walk? Sure it will. But is that what gets us there? Of course not. And thanks be to God for it. He is our complete salvation. It's in his holy name I say, amen.
Amen.